quick note. If you want to understand what really makes people succeed in German and how you can build a language to actually use it, join my free live workshop at bettergerman.info/workshop. Maybe you start out, and usually people, when they start out something new, they're like, yay, I'm going to do this. Or at least they're not already thinking, oh no, I can't. And then for many people, there comes a point when they go like, oh, I will never do this. I can't. It's impossible. It's too hard, and so on. And if that has happened to you, or if you want to make sure that it's not going to happen to you, then this is the right episode for you. Welcome to the Better German podcast. I'm Susi Blümel, a German teacher and founder of Better German. This podcast helps you learn German in a simple and clear way, with useful words, clear sentence structures, pronunciation, and real-life topics from daily life and culture. You'll also get tips for learning German and understanding how the language actually works. And when you're ready, we have a free community and courses to support you even more. All right, so this is the first part. This was originally going to be one episode, but then it became long. So this is the first part of an episode of how not to get discouraged when you're learning German. And the first part contains tip 1 to 5 on how not to get discouraged on learning German. So the idea is, maybe you start out, and usually people, when they start out something new, they're like, yay, I'm going to do this. Or at least they're not already thinking, oh no, I can't. And then for many people, there comes a point when they go like, oh, I will never do this. I can't. It's impossible. It's too hard, and so on. And if that has happened to you, or if you want to make sure that it's not going to happen to you, then this is the right episode for you. So, yeah, there's an overlap. I was just preparing episodes, and there is another episode which is actually coming soon. This is called Good Habits. This is going to be kind of like a New Year's episode or a January episode on how to have or build good habits about learning German. Obviously not just as a New Year resolution, but anyway, there will be an overlap. But in this episode, we're really going to look, okay, what can you do if you're discouraged? We're looking at it from this angle. So the first thing that you have to make sure, this is probably true for pretty much anything and learning anything as well, but you have to make sure, what is your why? Like, why do you want to learn German? What is the purpose? You could think that this is very simple. Yeah, I want to speak German. Yes. So you can have a look. First of all, how does this apply to you? Is this something that will change your life? Is this something that you want to do? Is this something that you're doing for fun? Do you want to talk to a family member? Do you want to get a better job? Do you want to get any job? If you live in Austria or Germany, this could be a point. Like, you need to speak German. Do you want to relocate, and maybe even if you have a job, because there is companies in Austria that have a language, and in Germany and in all of the German-speaking countries, there are companies that have an internal language that is different, like English usually. There is a lot of tech companies. So if you come to Austria, for example, to Vienna as a programmer, you may not immediately need English, but I've heard from many people that it makes a difference. Honestly, I know people who have been here and who are happy, and just mainly they get along. A lot of people in Austria can speak English well enough to hold up a conversation. I keep hearing that Vienna is one of the best places if you only want to speak English ever, apparently, other than obviously English speaking countries. However, I've also heard that it's really not the same. And I've seen students of mine who were like, okay, I've been here for 10 years. And then she told me, you know what? I've talked to the janitor. This was a student of mine, and she worked in a school. And it was actually an English school. And she was like, you know what? I've been talking to the janitor. I could never talk to the janitor before because he didn't speak English, or he doesn't speak English. And now I've talked to him, and he's such a nice man. So things like that happen. So you have a different experience if you actually speak the language. So whatever it is for you, you need to be certain of that. Maybe you have had the thought, maybe I'm not good at German. Then I want to assure you that's not the point. That's not the problem. I'm going to show you what is the problem. And how I show you is I have actually put together a workshop. It's a free live workshop on Zoom. And in there, I'm going over what could make you think that. We'll cover what could go wrong, but I'm also going to show you how can it be done right? So go to bettergerman.info/workshop and sign up for the workshop, and I'll see you there. But then it goes deeper. For every single chapter that you learn, you should have clarity on how to apply that. It's not 100% the same. It's more like, for example, if you learn a specific aspect of grammar, let's say conjunctive, subjunctive mode. This is maybe a good example. A lot of people think that this is useless, and then it's very hard to learn. Don't get me wrong, you shouldn't be dabbling in subjunctive before you're really fluent and you can speak and you understand the language and you can use it. And then you start going into these more advanced grammar things. However, this is just an aside, because I sometimes say, yeah, you don't need so much grammar, you don't need so much grammar. And I realize this could sound as if I was anti-grammar. No, I'm not anti-grammar. I love grammar, as a matter of fact. I have a lot of big grammar books, but everything at its time. You don't need big grammar books, or any grammar books, really, at the very beginning. However, there comes a time in your German language journey, let's put it like that, where you may learn conjunctive, and then you have to understand why is it used, what is it used for, because otherwise it's impossible. Everything that you learn, no matter what it is, and no matter how much you learn, and no matter how many hours you spend, if you don't have a validity for it, if you don't have a reason, a purpose for it, like the whole thing, or for the specific point of it, it's just gonna disappear out of your mind. Unless you're a super math student. There are other factors for things that disappear. That is true. And I'll talk about that a little later. However, I guarantee for you, if you learned something at school, at university, at work, and you had absolutely no idea what it is for, that made any sense to you, it will just completely disappear. You will turn around and that's it. I see that in math. I liked math, so it wasn't so hard for me. So what I did when I learned math, I later realized that I had actually learned that from a course that I took as a kid. What I learned was I was usually, and this has become second nature for me, I was figuring out how could that be used? How could I use it? Or at least how could it be used generally? And then it was much more interesting. But, for example, there was one part of math. I don't want to make everybody be weirded out about math, but there was a specific thing that I really didn't know why we're learning this. And honestly, the way it was taught, it wasn't taught anywhere. This is something that I have to admit that is like, if you want to learn something yourself or help your children, you can do a lot with this. Very, very often, this is completely omitted. So yes, we tell children, okay, if you learn math, then you will notice when people give you enough, like if they give you enough money back or something. But for most of the things that they actually learn in math, they have absolutely no sense of why are we doing this. And that is sad, because most of what you do learn in math, at least in school, I didn't study math at university, actually is valid and has purposes. And if we were teaching them, people would be much more interested. So, same thing in German. You need to have your personal reason, but you also, for everything you learn, you need to be sure that you know why are you learning this. Sometimes it's obvious, but sometimes it's not that obvious. Giving you one more example, people think, a lot of people learning German are very desperate about articles, and they think it's very, very hard to learn them. I mean, I admit, it's something that you have to do extra compared to English, where you just have to learn what the word means and how you say it and so on. However, it is not rocket science. It's not that hard. I mean, we only have 3 of them. And there's actually a lot of things in the English language that are, I think, for example, much harder to learn the pronunciation correctly, because German, once you have learned a few things and you read it, you can relatively easily figure out how to say it. English is much tougher in that respect, but still people are really not happy with those articles. What I've seen in some of my students is nobody tells them, or they don't realize why they're learning them. I mean, other the fact that's the way it is, we have der, die, and das, and every object is one of them. But the point is, you have to understand, you cannot even make a simple sentence like this or understand. Like, I bought a new vase. It is beautiful. But let's say, that would be simple. Ich habe eine neue Vase gekauft. Sie ist sehr schön. So you're saying sie, she. So basically you're saying, I bought a new vase. She is very beautiful. So now it could happen that the whole sentence is longer and you say she is very beautiful, referring to that vase. If you don't know that she would be referring to the last thing, that is a D, that is female, then you would be completely lost. And that could be considered weird. That's just one small example. That could be considered weird. Granted, I understand if you're coming from a language that doesn't do that, it is weird. However, unfortunately, that's the way this language works. And it is totally learnable. It's not that hard. I have seen many learners, German learners, work hard and still feel stuck. And that's not because they were not talented or something like that, but because they were employing the wrong method. And most traditional courses do that. They use methods that make a lot of people not succeed. You can see that very easily. There is many people that learn German at school, but still they don't speak it. Or that even go to courses and they learn it and they put in the work and they learn grammar rules and they still don't speak it. So what is it that actually makes people learn German? And this is what I'm going over in the free workshop, how to actually learn German. I would love to see you there. It's a live free workshop on Zoom and it's an interactive workshop. Whatever your German level is, you will be able to say your first sentences after this workshop. So I hope to see you there. You can find all the infos and you can sign up for it at bettergerman.info/workshop. But if you don't understand that isn't just something to make people crazy, but that there is an actual reason to learn it, because otherwise you will never be able to understand some things. I don't care so much if you make a few mistakes, but you need to be understood. And this is something that can prevent understanding. So that's why you have to learn it. And only after you have figured it out and really understood it yourself, you can actually then start successfully learning it. Because if you try forcing yourself learning something that doesn't have value for you, that value that you determine, then you will not benefit from it. It doesn't matter. You might be able to learn it for a test, and then you will forget it, and you will not be able to apply it for it. Speaking of tests, that's actually something I left out on my notes. I have notes here. I put the note on my notepad here. That is actually something that I'm going to add here. And it is related to what I said before. If you're learning to pass a test, it will cause frustration. I mean, honestly, if you learn to pass a test and that's all you want, and you're not interested in actually learning German, okay, fine, then you can learn to pass the test and then pass the test, and then that's fine. I'm telling you, however, a lot of people can't even do that. There is a lot of people that cannot just learn things verbatim and that's it. I don't actually think that that's a very big quality if you can. But even then, you will be frustrated because you will just spend your time, waste your time, I have to say, because you still have to put in the time. And you could just as well, if you put in the time, do it properly and actually learn to apply it. So never just learn for a test. Always learn so you can apply it. Everything else is going to be a waste of time, and you might look back and go like, I've done this. I hear this all the time from students that are in school or adults that I'm teaching German or English. I learned this for so and so many years in school and I don't know anything. There are other factors, but before we even go into them, like when I'm talking to a student and I start kind of like help them learn properly, before they don't stop learning exclusively for exams, we're not getting very far. Honestly, if I was designing a school, I would get rid of that kind of marks. Yes, we do have exams. If you take an English or a German class with me, you do have exams at the end, but we're certainly not learning for them. These are really designed in a way to actually test real application, first of all, but also they're really only there to verify and to give the final acknowledgement. So we never learn on them. Good. So the next thing that is also something that could be easily overlooked, and it is something even I sometimes overlooked with my students. You have to have a schedule. If you want to learn anything, if you want to do anything, you have to set aside a time when you're doing that. Ideally, I'm just telling you, it depends, of course, how fast you want to progress. But if you want to progress relatively fast and you're still having a busy day and work full time and stuff like that, I would say ideally, either you have a course or you take some time, 2 nights a week. The best course schedule I've seen as far as progress is concerned with my students were courses where we did 2 nights a week. So if you do a self-paced course, for example, if you get on my Get Talking program, this is a self-paced course. So that means you learn in your own speed. It is easier because you can determine what your schedule is and you can shift it. But still, even if you're doing a self-paced course, it doesn't matter. There's a lot of different approaches you can take. I do think that doing a course that is a good course and factors in different things and factors in writing, reading, practicing, understanding, and all of these things well, like I did in mine, I think this is the thing that will get you the fastest progress. But we're not necessarily looking how is my course the best, but how do you not get discouraged? So if you don't set a schedule that is like enough for you to make progress, then you will get discouraged. If you take 10 minutes a week, you will get discouraged. I mean, yes, I think 2 nights a week plus some extra time for reading and doing homework would be ideal. So that would be altogether at least 3 nights a week. That is ideal and you make fast progress. However, if you're doing something like 15, 20 minutes every day and you stick with it, that can also still get you progress. But of course, you have to adjust the schedule to what you want to achieve. So if you want to achieve fluency because you want to have another job or a better job and you work in Austria, you have to factor in about a year of learning German minimum. And this is not a year of learning German once a week. This is a year of like really doing 3 hours a week. And this is not because German is such a big, terrible language. This is just what it takes to learn a language. German is not the most difficult language of all. It's not the easiest language of all, but there's statistics. So if you're learning it, you might find it hard as anything. If you're practicing the piano or learn how to knit, there will be times when things are hard. Yes, but looking at statistics, it's not the most difficult language in the world. Every language becomes super frustrating if you only put in 10 minutes. The other thing is anything that you could hit that will make you kind of stop doing it is so much easier if you don't have structure. If you have at least a schedule, then this is some sort of accountability. So, yes, that's another thing. You need to make a schedule. And then we're getting started. Once you have your reason, and for every specific subject, the reason why it is there, and you have a schedule set, then can you get started on actual learning. And then the next thing is, when you're a beginner, focus on words. There's a few things that you can do when you're a beginner, but definitely one of them is focus on individual words. Take a list of, for example, there's dictionaries, picture dictionaries. My first 1,000 words in English, or German actually. Things like that. Start with nouns. Start with words that you have in your environment and only with them. And you can do that for a while. So that is the thing. If you don't do that, and if you don't get a basic vocabulary of a few hundred words before going into super deep grammar, then you will be frustrated because you're not going to be able to say anything. Even if you know the structure, if you don't have any words, then it's not going to help. All right, so this is the end of part 1. In the next episode, we're going to cover the most common pitfalls. We're going to cover the tips 6 to 10 and 1 bonus tip. So see you and or hear you there. Bye-bye. Here is a story from one of my students. She came to Austria because of love, and she started learning German, and she tried learning German, and she learned German with different people. She had private teachers and private tutors that tried to help her, and she worked hard, and she didn't speak German. Then she came to me. I worked with her, and she was not a difficult student, frankly. Not at all. She was one of the easiest students I've ever had. We didn't do private lessons. She was in one of my small group programs, and after 2 months, she spoke German. That's her saying that, not me. Her name was Diana. And I'm not telling you this because I want to tell you how great of a teacher I am, but I'm telling this to you because what was wrong here was the method. It wasn't her, it wasn't the language. And most people, when they run into a problem, they think it's them or they think it's the language. And it's neither of them. Everyone can learn German, but you have to use the right method. So if you want to know what you can do to actually learn German, then join me in the free workshop, How to Actually Learn German. It's really a culmination of all the things that I'm using in my German programs and also in the podcast, by the way. Join me in the workshop. It's a live free workshop with me. I'd love to see you there. It's on Zoom and you can find out everything about it at bettergerman.info/workshop.